You're on camera.
Oh yeah. Hi everyone. Here's Casey too. Casey says hello.
Oh,
and goodbye.
and bye. Can you make it out the door, Casey? Open it with your big giant paw.
This is I'm too delicate. Wowzers. Well, there you go, hey. Hi everybody. How was your meditation? Mine was interesting. Can I go first?
Please.
Okay. So I went to, you said something about a tree. I was kind of half in and half out by the time we got there. But there was a tree, so I was kind of just there and looking at my surroundings. And again, it was this field, and the grass was really high and really sort of golden. And I was sort of like, well, what am I doing here, right? What's going to happen next? What's going on? And this huge bull, like, you know, in New York City, in front of the stock exchange, that huge bull,
Giant bull, yeah.
Giant bull,
Bronze bull.
came up beside me. And he looked at me and was and I sort of looked like, and he looked at me and said, well, what do you want to know? And I was just stunned. Like, I wasn't expecting this huge bull, humongous, like he said, it was just like, he was all muscular and just gorgeous. And he just looked at me and he said, well, put on those robes and come with me. And I looked over, and hanging on a nail on the tree were these robes and like a satchel kind of thing. So I put those, and he said, put your hand on my shoulder, which was like
Right up there.
up there, and walk with me. And we just walked and walked through these fields of like golden grain of some sort. I don't know, but it was very, very lush. And there were like birds and other trees that I could see far away. And then he was still, well, what do you want to know? What questions do you have? And I said, I want to be able to walk in my truth. And he just kept walking with me, and then he stopped. We sort of came to the top of this like knoll, I guess. It was a little bit of a higher ground. And he just said, well, sit down and look up. And when I looked up, the sky had gone all gray, but it was like there was a, you know, hey guys.
Excuse me. Okay, carry on.
And you know how it can be gray, how it can be overcast, but there's still sunlight. So it was like that. And I looked up, and the sky was this sort of light, sort of steel kind of gray, but it was moving. And it was like there were like the zodiac symbols in the sky, and they were just sort of moving around, and I got the impression that I had to ask what I wanted to know, and ask my questions if I wanted to walk in my truth. There were lessons to be learned, and that's kind of where they were. And that by sitting and meditating upon this, whatever this swirling sort of sky was, that I'd be able to draw my answers. And I had a book in my satchel, and I was supposed to write these down. Learn your lessons and walk in your truth. So I guess I've got some studying to do. I guess.
Or of course, in the idea of the zodiac and the symbols and the swirlings is this idea of the cycles we live in, that things come in their time.
Yeah.
Things come in their time, and things will come in their time.
Yeah.
That you are walking in your truth, and that the path may not be that clear because it's next, or there's always a next.
There's always a next.
There's that time, that cycle.
Continuation, that cycle. Yeah.
Naughty boy.
There's the troublemaker. Hey, Mr. Trouble.
Oh, innocent me. Oh, yeah.
Right? It was all Casey's fault, was it?
I think so.
So that was it. It was just very large and very grand and very like, I just felt like I was there for so long, and we walked for so long in just silence, and everything was still. Like, not still in the sense that nothing was stopped, but still in the sense of silence. Like the grass was undulating, this tall grain was undulating, and there were other like movement of like birds and like
life.
Of life. There was movement of life, but it was still. It was still in the sense of quiet and peaceful. Like there was no noise. It's where I feel I go to when I used to study the Bible. There was always this one that always I held on to a lot, which was be still. If I was feeling a lot of anxiety or anything, it was I would be still, and that was that stillness that I was feeling as I was walking with this large creature. Large, muscular, warm, and smooth and soft, and like I could almost, I know I've been around cattle enough, I know what cows smell like, and they've got this rich, earthy, delicious smell about them, and that was sort of in the air with the smell of the grain and just the sweetness of life, the sweetness and the quiet of everything that was around. And then just to reach the top of this knoll and just to sit in his presence, because he was a presence, and just to look up and see all this going on in the sky, but all quiet, and just knowing that that was for me was that was profound.
Nice. Well, I had some profound too.
Oh yeah. Oh dear. What? What? Heavens to
Oh my
Murgatroyd.
gosh.
What?
Do I need revelations?
not biblical ones.
No,
I hope.
no.
Not that kind of
Not that kind of
revelations.
personal.
Okay. Personal revelations.
Okay.
Well, mine was personal too. That walking in your truth thing, that's like, that's interesting way of it coming through. But yeah, go.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to remember how this all started, and I guess I'm not really oh yes, I remember now. So I was then I left us off with a tree on the hill in the grass, and I did get a little bit of visualization about being at the base of a great tree, and but it didn't really develop until first it was like I was meditating in my body, and I was feeling my body, and I was hearing the blood rushing through my veins.
Wow.
Speaking of inner hearing,
yeah.
There's like the inner hearing of that's the sounds you don't usually notice of the blood going through your veins, and I heard my heart pumping, and and my breathing, and that's what I was hearing. I was so much in the physical, and from that, eventually I started to kind of get glimpses back into visualization of grass, and then I was at like this wooden table in sort of a dark cabin or room, rustic. It was all very rustic, but I was at a wooden table, and I was working with plants, and there was like, I don't identify them, but they were like different little flowers and stuff that seemed to me I was doing something with, that they had different properties. What happened there? I don't know why it shut. Is it plugged in properly?
Yeah.
Would it shut off? Anyway.
Carry on.
So we didn't go to Messenger yet. Plants, and then there was this theme of, which I'm going to have to really develop with some other meditations, is more little fairies, because I was dealing with little plants and flowers, and kind of that, thinking that they had different properties, and there was like these little bright sprites around too, so kind of helping me or something. And I came to this point in that meditation, which was very personal. It was about connecting to the higher, this higher self, or the inner voice. And I got this message that I was fortunate in that, for me, from an early age, and probably even as a child, it was easy for me to not identify with my ego mind. And that I could step away from my ego mind and know that I am not my thoughts. My thoughts are thoughts, and that I don't necessarily identify with my ego mind and my thoughts. That I know that there's another quality to self. And then I was thinking of the traditional, so often the Hierophants depicted with these disciples, and I got that that's what the disciples were, is one disciple is the ego mind, which is a concept we're all familiar with.
Right,
for people on a path of spirit, or should be having awareness of that concept, and that there's the higher mind, or the subconscious, and the higher mind, that is the Hierophant.
Mm-hmm.
But then the other character, there's two, of course, and that the second character is a concept called, that I'm not all that familiar with, but I have to look into, and I don't know if it's anywhere in modern psychology or pop psychology, but the ego heart, the ego feelings. That there's more than just the ego mind, there's ego feelings. And the ego feelings is, I'm not going to say too great, but and I have an attachment to, that I don't have to the ego mind. And there's this idea that, well, the ego mind can be set aside when we participate in the higher mind. Mm-hmm. And when we participate in the higher mind, it becomes obvious that the ego mind is not the boss. But that is a whole nother ball of wax to admit to attachment to the ego heart, the Venus. So in the Tree of Life, you have Hod and Netzach.
Right.
The thinking and feeling. And that the Venus quality is like the ego heart.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something to work on, is these emotional attachments.
Right,
to the past, to feelings of the past, to whether they're good, bad, or ugly. There can be a strong attachment through the memory, the self-identification with emotional experiences.
Right, yes.
And that too needs to be disciplined, needs to be learning, needs to be growing, needs to be, that's the other disciple.
Right. And that has a connection to, that's that Venus connection.
The Venus connection.
Which is the connection to Taurus.
Which is the connection to Taurus.
So
it's
think
the
you have
nail.
Something there.
It's the nail, part of that nail that creates self-identity.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it is the way to. So how do we put the ego mind, the ego heart, ego feelings, those Venus qualities in perspective?
Mm-hmm.
And that is through,
and have balance. And
that is by, if one is able to touch, get an insight or a communication, an inner hearing from the higher mind, when that comes, that revelation happens, the ego mind, it's pretty obvious that the ego mind is not the source of that energy, that there's a higher mind. Well, you have to get in touch with the higher feelings too, that there's a higher heart, that there's a higher feeling, a higher passion that will supplant, which will put the ego heart, the Venus heart, the personal heart in perspective.
Oh.
So it's like, well, if you think, you're so attached to these feelings because probably because you don't have PTSD. Probably because you had this nice childhood, you were just fortunate enough to have like parents that loved each other and weren't addicted to anything.
Well, but people that don't have that fortunate upbringing,
right,
also have to bring that into balance, because they're also attached to that ego, heart, to those memories,
those feelings,
even
if they're not
that good. Yes, and that's and that part needs healing as well as the mind. So you reach up to that higher heart.
That higher heart.
And seek healing there. Yeah.
So that was the message, that to create more inner balance and a higher perspective that can be by lessening the identification
with those emotions
and memories, even though they may mostly be positive, and even though they may have been part of my path to connect to higher energies. Fortunate to be in a loving family, very fortunate to be in a loving family. Wasn't too twisted. I'm not gonna, anyway, we won't get into that.
We won't talk about your brothers.
Anyway, but
I'm just kidding, guys.
Unfortunately, but nonetheless, yes, that may be fairly nice, and the memory has attachments to that, and the memories that create our self-identity.
Be them for good or bad,
or ill, or
both.
Whether they need healing much or not, it's still an attachment that can be grown beyond.
Yes, because even if they're good memories, and even if they're pleasant, and you didn't have any, extreme trauma attached to your ego heart.
Yeah.
Holding on to those too tightly can still cause an imbalance in your life, because your life now is not what your life was back then.
No.
And if you keep harking back to those, well, this is how it was, and you're subconsciously attached to those, you're not progressing forward.
No. Yeah, that's right. You can't, if you're asking, who am I? That is always, bring that into the moment.
Right.
It's not about the memories.
Yeah. They may have helped to develop who you are, but they're not who you are now.
Who you are now.
Yeah.
And then there was stuff about this path, and the path, because I was wondering about my path as well. And the message, I actually saw this sort of a ribbon path, and it was about I guess kind of allowing. It was about gratitude for what you have, creates more of an allowing for the good stuff ahead.
Right, and welcome it in if you allow it in.
Yeah, and then there was stuff about, again, there was this message about prayer, prayer as kind of opening the way forward.
Yeah. Wow.
Something about this, so the desire to be all that one can be, and that about moving along that path. Path to paradise, apparently.
Apparently so. That's what they say. Yep, that's what they say. So.
Okay.
You want to shut that? We're going to shut you down, guys. Sorry, not.
And we're going to open up a chat. If anybody wants to be invited to the chat, you let us know.
And fill us in once again. It's been fun, and I hope you enjoyed it. And fill us in on what your meditations may have been, or your